It's so simple and you can access that at any time. I mean, that's my experience. Everyone can have their own different experience of meditating, but
Well, I think you're bringing up a very good point, which is a lot of people think meditation is like, sitting in lotus, you got your little mudras going on and, you're doing the thing and maybe you're oming. Um, but meditation can be simply that, just laying on the ground, breathing, um, just bringing in that moment of mindfulness for you. You can do that while you're washing dishes. You can do that while you're doing another mundane task. It's just being aware, bringing your consciousness to breathing, bringing your consciousness to what you're doing it in a very conscious, deliberate way of like, okay, this is what I'm doing, and that's all I'm doing right at this moment is still meditation. If you talk about, like mindful meditation, transcendental meditation, different kinds of meditation, then okay, we're getting more nuanced. But as far as meditation in itself as a practice can be just sitting and oming, can be just, rocking back and forth. It can be, tapping on a drum. It can be all sorts of things.
what is mindfulness meditation to you, and how do you find that peace?
So, when we're talking like, because I'm going to talk from like a counselor psychological perspective. So that's what I'm trained in. But
Yeah.
any of your cognitive behavioral therapies talk about mindful meditation. And so that is basically you watching your thoughts, which is very like, I'm going to slaughter his name, but Chungnan Trungpa Rinpoche. Um, he wrote like Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism and stuff like that. And so he talks about mindful meditation that basically anytime you have a thought while you're sitting there, if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, that you label the thought. You're not focusing on the thought, you're not entertaining the thought, you're not debating the thought, you're just having a thought and you're letting it be a thought. It's kind of along the lines of radical acceptance. And I think that's ACT. But anyhow, so you have this idea that while you're sitting there and breathing, and you're gonna, maybe start off with, okay, I'm practicing inhale, exhale. It's like the mindfulness is what you're doing is you are directing the mind to where you want it to be. You are applying your consciousness on whatever it is that you might be focusing on. And typically it's about breath. And inevitably, if you're doing it for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, your mind is going to start having thoughts about what you are doing. It's going to be like, oh, what's inhale, exhale, or wow, that was a shorter inhale than that exhale, or whatever. Or something not even like, oh, did I leave my stuff on the stove? Whatever. The brain will just, you start watching your brain, is basically in a nutshell what I would say mindful meditation is. And the key or the helpfulness is to not really engage with it, allow the thoughts to come and go as they please, and try to, because you don't want to like steer it towards anything because you're not controlling anything. That's not the point of mindful meditation. It's more of just the observation of, wow, my thoughts are going there. Wow, they're really judgmental, or whatever's happening, or like, wow, like it's getting violent in here, whatever might be happening with your brain. And then the idea of not only just accepting it, but also just building upon it, because in the beginning, you're not going to find peace. It's not going to be like that. That's through meditation practice.
So
So
you're
that's
saying,
that's the practice of mindful meditation, is basically that acceptance that you're talking about, that over time, like you sit down for 5 minutes, you're gonna be listening to your brain for 5 minutes. It's not gonna be, oh, I found my Zen. Like it's really not gonna happen. And what does happen is as you practice those 5, 10 minutes here and there and there, and what you said about the consistency can be very helpful because the brain, you're basically conditioning your brain. So the brain has been undisciplined for years, right? Because you've never really listened to it, you're not paying attention to it, you're not being mindful, you're not sitting with it. Right. It's just bouncing wherever it's going to bounce, and that's that. And then if you have mental issues or if you have like more compulsive personalities or whatever, the brain's just going off like all the time, madness, right?
Mhm.
So then when you start to try to look at it, right? The goal when you first start meditation oughtn't be to control it. It oughtn't be to like seek that peace because you're not going to find it. It's just observing. It's just
Mhm.
listening, observing, and seeing what's going on, just spending some time with yourself in non-judgmental territory as much as possible. Over time, if they say like if you wear the same shirt or like you do the same ritual before you do it, you light this candle and you sit in this special chair, you start to condition your body to be like, oh, this is what we're doing, we're meditating, this is how it's going, we're doing the observation, right? And so over time, if you keep doing that, the body gets into that more, if you will, meditative or mindful state much quicker because
Mm.
it's conditioning. That's what happens. But you don't have to. And it is just what it is. And when you're more of a free-spirited or chaotic personality, yeah, that ritual isn't going to help you. But for people that are and need ritual, I will say that that can be very beneficial.
Mm.
And then the second part of your question that you asked is, how do I find peace? Um, it is through a myriad of ways. Sometimes my body needs stretching, so I'll do some yoga or just stretching, like not as structured stuff. Sometimes I find that I meditate better in the morning. Sometimes it's evening. Um, and for my meditations, there's one of two ways that I do it. I will either be talking to my guides and my people around me, and that's a meditative state, or it's more of a calming, kind of going within myself and settling myself and cutting all cords, cutting all noise
Mm.
from my auric field, I guess you'd say.
Mm.
Just in general to allow myself that peaceful feeling.
Mm. I'm going to read what I wrote down after that meditation that I did the other day. How do I find the present moment? What brings me to it? And this is what worked for me that day. It might not work for me another day, but I like to do long inhales. Nose or mouth is fine, whatever works for you. And then even longer exhales. And to me, I found it really helpful to make that exhale make a sound. Mine sounds like a cold winter's windy, very windy night. And when I'm exhaling out, I'm imagining breathing out all of the fears, all of the worries, the doubts, the insecurities, whatever the stress. And when I'm breathing in, I imagine filling up my whole body like a gathering up of all the fear, the stress inside, and then on the exhale, blowing it out. There's something about when I'm making the sound of blowing out, it's like reinforcing my brain that, yes, I am releasing
Mhm.
out that which does not serve me.
Mhm.
Like, I'm glad I wrote it down, my experience, because it was a profound remembrance of this is available at any time.
Well, I think that you're also bringing up an important part is orientation. So when we think about the importance or even the benefits of meditation, right? So
Mhm.
even if it's 5 minutes and you've just spent it fighting with yourself, um, the bottom line that you're experiencing in that moment is true consciousness. You are aware of where you are, who you are, what's going on right now, which are not often things that we experience. Most of the time, we are either thinking of the future or the past, not very often the present. That's the issue for us a lot of times. And so when you're talking about, being connected with spirit, but also being grounded, I would say that what you're talking about is orientation. It's like where am I in this big, huge ball and sea of energy,
Yeah.
And so when we tether, to the up and we tether to the down, then it's like, ooh, okay, I'm right here. Uh,
Yeah.
which is very helpful because this world, this realm, I would say, is very active when you are present, when you are grounded, when you are truly here, uh, able to realize or orient yourself to the moments in which you have a lot more influence on what is happening, what you're doing, and how you're affecting your environment rather
Mm.
than not having that. Like if you are in your daydreamy place, you meet the people who are like, oh, everything is so great, but their life is kind of chaotic and messy because they're not here. And then if you have people that are like nose to the grindstone, like this is how it is, usually they're very not happy because,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
uh,
It's like finding that balance, trying to find that balance of,
mhm.
yeah. Mm.
And meditation helps you get there because without any perspective on where you are or what's going on or what your brain is saying to you or any of those things, you really don't have the ability to have that much influence on what's happening, what's going on, and where you're going.
And me and my personal journey, because I can get super fly, super high. I am working on, it's a slow work in progress of just being grounded. That's why I feel like today was such a nice day. And I just wanted to lay out. The ground was still kind of wet. I just wanted to lay out and just like soak up the sun, but while laying on the earth. Yeah.
You call that
That's,
earthing, right?
yeah. We could be
Yeah.
like meditating slash earthing. I don't know. To me, they're kind of, would you say they're the same thing? I know earthing is very popular. That term is very popular now.
So again, when we're talking about meditation in a very general term, I would say that anything that you're doing in a conscious way is meditation. Mindful meditation is very important if you're going towards wanting to have more of a peaceful life,
Mm,
because it is important to know what your mind is saying because it's running the show. Like your mind, if you're thinking all day long very negative thoughts, then you are going to have negative experiences, even if your being is saying, oh, life's great and wonderful. And, if your brain is going over and over about like how you mess everything up and you're an awful person, like you
mm,
can't get your self-esteem out of that hole. So it's very important, I would say, as a tool as well as a peacemaking device of mindful meditation, just to find out where your brain's at. What are you thinking about? Like,
yeah.
and you'll never know what you're thinking about all moments of the day because that
Yeah.
would be pretty impossible, but to at least get a good glimpse, and if you're not shocked by what your brain is thinking about, I don't think you're doing it right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, that's funny. I listen to a lot of like, you know, spiritual teachers and stuff on YouTube, and Eckhart Tolle is one of them. And it's interesting what he had to say about what he thinks about the word mindfulness. And he says that he doesn't like using the word mindfulness because it is implying that your mind is full. So what do you think about that? I mean, it's an interesting idea, yeah.
Yes. Um, so it's kind of like having to, I guess I'd say, walk before you can jump. So yes, like so what I find, okay, so you could go about this one of two ways. You could say, okay, I'm gonna sit down here and I'm gonna fight with my being to be empty. I don't want to think thoughts, you know? So when you sit down in that way, I think you're just going to have a bad time because, you're already setting yourself up for frustration, if you will, by saying, you know, I'm not going to have thoughts. Like you are going to have thoughts. It's natural. The thing about mindfulness is as you go along your path, um, there is less chatter once you get to the point where your being has a consciousness practice throughout the day, that you are being more conscious of thoughts. You will find that it's kind of like the brain gets tired or it's doesn't have much to say kind of thing. It's like, oh, we you heard everything. It's like kind of like having a backed up answering machine, right? When you first start doing mindfulness, because the mind is like, oh my God, you're listening. Here, there's all this information. Like this is what we've been trying to say. This is happening. Oh, and then over time, as you have been listening to it, and everything kind of calms down, then it's like, okay, now I can actually receive my messages. I don't have to keep them on the machine. I can receive them in real time. So my brain will tell me this is coming in, and I'll be like, oh, thank you, brain. And that's great information. But it isn't like a big download flood of thoughts. So yes, like ultimately, we do want to have more of an empty mind, if you will. A busy mind is not a healthy mind. Um, so when we think about that also in Western culture, we're kind of taught that intelligent people have a busy mind. Like the mind is always working and coming up with new thoughts and all this kind of stuff. But I would contest that. I think that having a busy mind is not helpful because you don't have these moments to put those thoughts together. If your thoughts are always bombarding you, then you don't have those moments of peace to allow in, like what we were talking about, spiritual or universal or outside information, which is where really you learn and more things are understood. So if you have this constant chattery brain, that's busy, you know mentally, I don't want to say that. Just busying itself.
Mhm.
You can edit this later, right? Because I wanted to say like,
It's
jerking
okay.
itself off because that's what it's doing, it's just it's
I mean,
entertaining itself. It's just,
yeah,
doing its thing. So it's not really being helpful to you. And I would
it's
say that when you can more be able to clear it and be centered and present, what you need to know in that given moment is given to you in a very like clear and peaceful way instead of like this frantic bombardment of information that seems to happen, especially in the very beginning when you haven't been listening to yourself.
the podcast I was listening to the other day was talking about, what do you do with that? What do you do with all those things? And imagining sitting on the ground or sitting on the ground actually, and bringing all that information and those thoughts and just like imagining them going down through your body to the earth and giving the earth all of that because it can be too much for us. So
Mhm.
it's like the earth is wanting to just like absorb all of our good and bad energy, whatever. And the other day I went out to nature. I went walked down by the lake here, and it was maybe for like 30 seconds. I took my shoes off and I just held on to the moss, and I was imagining all the thoughts, the chaotic, the good, the bad, all of it just going down through my hands into the moss, into the earth. And it did alleviate some crazy chatter that was happening in my mind. So I found that that has helped me. And I will be doing that much more when it becomes more warmer outside.
Okay, so two pieces there I'd like to say is that I would say as you're conveying that, that also brings to mind anxiousness. So people that are dealing with anxiety, it often is because the brain is just churning out so much repetitious or just thoughts. It's kind of going off. And there's lots of we could get into neurological and that kind of stuff at some point, but so brain is just thinking about all that stuff. And then as you're discharging it, into the ground, that's great. So also, like you said, sometimes we're limited by our circumstances. So we can't get outside. It's snowing, it's raining, it's cold, whatever. Maybe I live in an apartment, so it's really hard to get outside.
Yeah.
So other things, you can imagine that grass under your feet. You can imagine touching that moss. You can imagine, you can put, sounds of nature on if that helps you in the background,
Yeah.
to just envelop yourself in that because the mind is very powerful. Um, and so we can, create that stuff for ourselves. Also the shower, water of any kind is really helpful.
Mhm.
Colors are also very beneficial. Movement is also very beneficial if you can. For some of our friends that might have mobility issues, then the mind might be exactly where it's at, is just kind of imagining those things as much as you can. But then also comes the separate question or problem is that my mind is so active, I can't imagine, I can't
Mm.
center it, I can't think of those things. So,
That's a good point, Michelle. That's a
yes,
good point. Yeah.
yes. So I think sometimes that's what's great about YouTube or things like that is just turning things on in the background. Because those things, even though you might not be consciously able to receive them or believe them or think about them, subconsciously that stuff is getting in. So if you just leave stuff on, I call it like the backdoor meditation.
Hmm.
It's like if I just leave stuff on in the background, like maybe it's vibrational music, maybe it's Eckhart Tolle's talks, maybe it's Esther Hicks talking, maybe it's
Or
whoever.
like I like to do I am affirmations
Yes.
running in the
Any of
background.
that stuff
Yeah.
in the background can really help the being as far as like the subconscious stuff that if you can't do it right now, don't get frustrated. Try not to get frustrated because the frustration or anger is a hamper because you don't want to do it again. You will not want to try that again because it made you so angry. So you try to have it be a loving action. It's kind of like a kid. A kid is not going to want to, I don't know, take a bath if you don't have toys in there. You got to
Yeah.
make it fun, so that your mind and your being want to do it.
Yeah.
So,
I was gonna ask you, would you recommend, this is just something that came to me at the beginning of our conversation, put a timer on your phone, like let's say a minute or two? Would you recommend like putting a timer on to say, okay, I'm gonna sit down at this time and put a timer on for 2 minutes and I'm going to just sit in those 2 minutes and just observe what comes to mind? Would you recommend
yeah.
a timer? Yeah,
Yeah.
something like, mhm.
There's also like on YouTube that I love, which are like these 10-minute or 20-minute meditations. This is probably a little further on, but when you first start 1 or 2 minutes, yeah,
Yeah.
turn on your timer. And when it's over, it's over. Just do it. And don't judge your performance. Don't be like, oh God, that was a waste of time. No, it's not. Like
That's
you
a good
just
point.
you sitting down and wanting to do that is helpful.
Yeah.
So, but the YouTube videos, you can look for them and they give you chimes like every 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. And that's a wonderful tool to see where you went. Because especially in the beginning, when you start doing these meditations, 5-minute meditations, really long. And your brain might start
It's so
out,
long.
yes,
It's so long.
yes, and you might start off with, oh, I'm gonna think about my breathing, right? I'm gonna be on it. It's 5 minutes. It's so short. So you
Mhm.
do that and maybe for a minute. And then the next 4 minutes, you are off somewhere else, and the chime goes off, and you're like, "Oh shit!" like I was off somewhere else. Oh, so that's a wonderful tool too. Is like every so often to hear a chime or something to go off to tell you or remind you of where you're at in
Mm,
those moments because you will. It's just a fact.
yeah. I love though how you brought up being patient with yourself and giving yourself time to do it, like let's say you do, set a timer for 5 minutes, and the first minute is like you're focusing on your breath, and then the next 4 minutes is you go off, and then the timer goes off, and then you're like, oh man, like I just wasted that. But you didn't, though. You still set the intention to do it, and even though it's not perfect, or monk status, you still did it. You still did it the best that you could.
Yep. Well, I'd say in general, positive reinforcement has been proven over and over and over to get better and deeper results. People
Yeah.
do not respond well to negative reinforcement. So, like when you tell yourself, oh, you suck at this, the next time you're going to want to do that, are you going to want to do that? No, because you suck at it, you
Yeah.
know, instead of the idea that I'm working on it. I'm trying, I'm practicing, I'm getting better every time I do it. That even lightens up the mood and gives the being something to work towards.
Yeah.
Whereas when you say you suck, you can't get better than that. You suck. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah. Like you're giving up before you even try again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder and harder each time to do it, the more that you judge or get critical on yourself because the being doesn't want to go through that. It will avoid negative consequences. That's how we're wired.
Yeah.
Um, so if you want to be able to do it, I would say be really kind, be unequivocally, unabashedly, you know, whatever, loving yourself unconditionally, just accepting whatever happens, whatever you think of, even if it's ugly thoughts, like imagine killing someone or I don't know, masturbating a giraffe or whatever it is that seems so awful to you as a thought.
Yeah.
Your thoughts, your brain is a curious 2-year old that just is exploring ideas and thoughts and all this kind of stuff. So when you look at it that way and you try to just, oh, wow, that's an interesting thought. I don't know why I'm coming up with that thought. That's better than, oh my God, I'm going to feel shame and guilt because I just had this thought. What an awful thought. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would
Well,
not recommend you do that.
yeah, but that brings up a good point of attachment and detachment. Don't attach yourself to the thoughts that come in during your practice,
Mhm.
because yeah, because then you're blocking the flow.
Mhm.
I mean, if that's your intention, is to just be sacred observer or observer.
Yep.
And so I like the visual of, detaching from everything and just like being that observer
Mhm.
of the thoughts. But something that I have found helpful that I will continue to do is when I have moments like I did the other day, the peaceful meditation practice or whatever, is to journal after. I find that really helpful. Like being able to go back and reread what I wrote just after doing the meditation
Absolutely.
is so powerful. It's just,
Yes.
2025 is the year that I have began writing again. And it feels good.
And I would say there's an important reason for that is that okay, so like we're talking about on like releasing the answering machine, right? So the deluge of thoughts and stuff that come through, it's kind of like word salad or it's just a bunch of thoughts, right? And so once if you will open the door to the closet that's overflowing and everything's out on the floor, right? So then when you're writing the journal, it's kind of like being able to sort through stuff. Or most of that stuff just got thrown away and now you have more clarity. So I would
Mm.
say that that's the reason why that can be so powerful for especially an active analytical mind like you have, is that ability to really be able to sift through that and be able to, oh, okay, now I don't have all this other stuff in my way, all the other thoughts that are just kind of backed up, on Highway 35.
Yeah. Yeah. But I also, though, do want to point out too, is don't underestimate the power of 1 minute. Like with anything, because a minute, I don't know, like you can really reset yourself in 1 minute,
True.
you know?
It's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't underestimate the power of a minute or 2 minutes while starting out because a lot can happen in that time.
That's
Because
cool.
really, time and space are, I mean, they're just, would you say, not made up constructs, but
They're malleable
yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
And apparently, according to the Course in Miracles, time is only relevant while we learn. Once you don't need learning, which I don't know if that's ever a thing, then time becomes more irrelevant.
in the process, in the time period of learning. But then after you learn and you go out and you apply what you've learned, maybe the application of that is there is no time that isn't as crucial, I guess, because
Yes.
it's more of like a play period, like you work and play, right?
Yeah.
I like that idea. Yeah. This has been very helpful, this talk, this
Awesome.
conversation. Is there anything else? Well, actually, Michelle, do you want to tell people who you are and your story? Whatever you're comfortable with. I didn't really introduce you at the beginning because I kind of wanted to just like dive into it, but don't feel like on the spot. But do you
I
want to
guess
when you
on some places those things matter. Uh, but yeah, I been a massage therapist for probably about 17 years. Body worker, energy worker, all that kind of stuff. It's been quite a journey and beautiful. Um, I died when I was 15. Um, I've been I have a lot, well, I wouldn't say I have a lot of health issues, but I have one in particular that really is pretty serious and can cause me immediate life-threatening circumstances. So it's been a driving force in my wanting to help other people and being very mindful and close with mortality. Um, and I just recently got my master's degree in mental health counseling. Yes, and I'm working towards my licensure. And so I guess that in a nutshell, I've held various businesses. I've held various classes, groups, spiritual groups, meditation groups, things like that for a number of years, probably about 13 years, I guess I'd say. And it's ongoing. And
yeah.
I just love working with people with mindfulness and exposing them to their own wondrous being that is being human and being able to get in touch with all the wonderful gifts and abilities that we have innately, that really meditation is one of those things that really help you unlock those realities, because the more that you can be unabashedly aware of yourself and unconditionally loving to yourself, um, the more you just kind of open up to the amazing, wonderful beings that we are, regardless of what you have done in your past. So I know some people are like, oh, I'm ashamed, maybe you got divorced, maybe you lied a lot, maybe you're an alcoholic, maybe you're just been an awful person. I don't know. The reasons behind a lot of that stuff is, within your mind. It's within the thoughts, it's within whatever trauma or damage you might have experienced as a child or later on in your life. And so not to get like super heavy and deep or anything, but just simply saying that you can all of that stuff is within your ability to forgive. And by
Mm,
you forgiving it, you automatically give others permission to forgive it in yourself, like others, you know. So I'd say that everyone is, I can't even say redeemable because it's not what it's about. It's more
mm,
of just you can accept yourself and be accepted, no matter who and what you are, if you just allow it. So
mm. I
that's
love
me.
it. See how great, Michelle. It's so much deeper. You're so much deeper than just, getting your master's and having all these life experiences. You are a truly wonderful, freaking awesome person.
Thank you. I
This is
appreciate that.
so fun. I love doing this. We should do this so much more.
Yeah.
Getting good conversation out into the world about, good wisdom, pieces of wisdom. And you have also assisted quite a few people through their is it psychedelic counseling? Although you're not trained in it on paper,
Yes.
but
I wouldn't
you,
say I counseled them. I'd
yeah,
say that I walked them through their psychedelic journeys.
yeah, guide. You've been
Yeah.
a great guide
Yep.
in that. So I hope
That
it's
is a
okay
huge
to,
interest to me for sure. Yeah.
yeah. Would you say that you're open to, if anybody that is listening or watching this would be open to having an assisted
Mhm.
journey? I'm sure you would be okay to.
Absolutely.
Anything else that we want to share or talk about? I mean, this is a great refresher course for me. I mean, I am in no way, shape, or form a professional meditator, but I'm working on it.
I don't think you can ever be a professional meditator.
I know that just came out of my mouth. Like, what is that?
Yeah. I think, well, see, that's an ego tool, right? It's like this idea that, there's a pinnacle to meet. There
Mm,
is a goal to meet, and then you're great. Um, so I'd like to dispel that as well. Is meditation is this beautiful tool because it's not it
a
doesn't
competition.
like the meter of awesomeness is your own experience. So it's like, oh, that was a good meditation, or like, oh, that felt like I wasted some time, but that's okay, whatever. But it does ebb and flow. I'll say that, even in my journey of, I don't know, what, 20 some years of meditation, that it's like there are times when it's just like, man, I can't get into it. Why can't I get into it, and get frustrated with it, and you just, okay, stop, drop, and roll. Just relax and it's fine. But there are frustrations that still come up with meditation simply because you can't help but have some expectations on it sometimes, like, oh, well, for a week, this has been amazing. So this one should be even better, or whatever. And
Mhm.
then you get into it and maybe nothing at all happens. So that can be very frustrating. All I can say is, again, I can't emphasize the idea of, radical self-acceptance and acceptance in general as such a benefit.
Mm, I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, a wonderful, a wonderful talk. And there will be definitely more coming your way, coming our way to spread some knowledge. Knowledge in action is power, right?
Yep.
People say knowledge is power, but I would say knowledge in
And
action,
action. Yeah.
applying it, knowledge applied.
Yeah.
So it feels really good that we're doing this.
Awesome.
We're
Well,
doing
thank
this.
you very much. I'm
Yeah.
very happy to be
Yeah.
considered and participating.
Oh my gosh, you are so loved and so needed in this world. So thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Awesome.